Derek Hartley had carefully cultivated the perfect cover as a mild-mannered software engineer in an upscale suburban neighborhood. His meticulously maintained home and seemingly ordinary life were anything but typical. Unbeknownst to his overzealous homeowners association and neighbors, Derek was a deep-cover federal agent investigating a complex network of white-collar criminals operating through seemingly legitimate community organizations. The morning began like any other in Willow Creek Estates, with manicured lawns and pristine driveways stretching as far as the eye could see. Derek Hartley stood on his front porch, deliberately adjusting a collection of garden gnomes that seemed slightly off-kilter, each one positioned with mathematical precision that would appear random to an untrained eye. Margaret Sinclair, the HOA board president, pulled up in her pearl-white Lexus SUV, her hawk-like gaze already narrowing as she approached Derek's property. She was a woman who had built her entire identity around control of the neighborhood, of every minute detail of every resident's life. "Mr. Hartley," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the morning's tranquility, "we've received multiple complaints about your unconventional landscaping." Derek turned, offering a disarming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Sinclair?" She produced a thick folder, its edges crisp and official-looking. Violation notices, 17 separate infractions, unauthorized garden sculptures, non-regulation lawn height, unapproved paint trim, fence measurement discrepancies. The list went on, each item delivered with the precision of a prosecutor. What Margaret didn't know was that each violation was carefully constructed. The garden gnomes weren't just decorations. They were sophisticated communication devices. A slightly uneven lawn concealed ground-penetrating sensors. The paint trim contained microscopic tracking markers. "I'll need you to come with us," Margaret said, signaling to two men who had been waiting in an unmarked black SUV. They looked less like HOA enforcers and more like professional operatives. Tailored suits, earpieces, hands that never strayed far from their sides. Derek knew this wasn't a typical HOA confrontation. The men moved with practiced efficiency. One produced what appeared to be a legal document meticulously forged, with watermarks and official seals that would pass a casual inspection. "Douglas County Community Compliance Order," the top of the document read, a fabrication so precise it could only have been created by someone with intimate knowledge of legal documentation. "You're being temporarily removed from the property pending a full compliance investigation," the larger of the two men stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Before Derek could respond, they had him in restraints. The entire operation took less than 3 minutes, practiced, precise, designed to minimize attention from neighbors. To anyone watching, it would appear like a legal eviction, nothing more. As they guided him toward the SUV, Derek allowed a momentary flicker of amusement. Margaret Sinclair and her associates had no idea they were playing directly into his hands. Each movement, each carefully orchestrated moment was being recorded, transmitted through channels they couldn't begin to comprehend. The suburban morning continued its peaceful rhythm. Sprinklers clicked on. A jogger passed by. Nobody would remember anything unusual about the quiet removal of Derek Hartley from 1247 Willow Creek Drive. Little did they know the game had only just begun. The unmarked SUV traveled through a series of seemingly random suburban streets, its occupants unaware that every movement was being meticulously tracked. Derek remained outwardly calm, his hands zip-tied behind his back, but his mind was a complex network of tactical assessments and communication channels. In a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the HOA operatives believed they had secured their prize. They dragged Derek into an interrogation room, stark white walls, a single metal table, industrial lighting that cast harsh shadows. Margaret Sinclair stood to the side, her composure slightly rattled but still maintaining an air of superiority. "Mr. Hartley," she began, "you've been a problem for this community for far too long." Derek's response was a measured silence that unnerved her more than any protest could have. Simultaneously, deep within a secure federal command center, Agent Elena Rodriguez was monitoring the situation. Derek was her top operative, a specialist in deep-cover investigations targeting complex criminal networks that hid behind the most innocuous of facades. "Tracking is solid," she muttered into her encrypted communication device. "All markers are transmitting. Initiate protocol Suburban Shield." Back in the warehouse, the first signs that something was wrong began to emerge. The communication devices the HOA team believed were secure started to malfunction. Small electronic glitches, a static burst here, a momentary signal interference there began to reveal cracks in their carefully constructed operation. Derek slowly raised his head, a ghost of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The zip ties that should have restrained him dangled loosely from his wrists. He had been free the entire time. "You've made a significant mistake," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that immediately silenced the room. With a series of precise movements, Derek activated a series of hidden devices. The room's electronics began to pulse with encrypted signals. Holographic displays materialized, revealing layers of financial transactions, communication logs, and intricate connections that painted a damning picture of the HOA's true operations. Margaret's face went pale as complex financial trails began to map themselves across the walls. Offshore accounts, money laundering networks, property fraud schemes that extended far beyond their suburban neighborhood. Federal Interagency Task Force, Derek stated matter-of-factly. You thought you were running an HOA. You were actually managing the front for a multi-state criminal enterprise. The door burst open. A tactical team in federal insignia swarmed the room, their movements synchronized and precise. Elena Rodriguez walked in, her presence commanding immediate attention. Derek Hartley, Senior Investigative Agent, Federal Economic Crimes Unit, she announced, her credentials displaying on the electronic screens. Everything from this moment forward is part of an active federal investigation. Margaret Sinclair and her associates found themselves transformed from predators to prey in a matter of moments. The carefully constructed facade of community enforcement crumbled, revealing a complex criminal network that had been operating in plain sight for years. Derek's seemingly random lawn decorations, his meticulous house maintenance, the very way he had positioned himself in the community, everything had been a carefully constructed trap waiting to be sprung. Within hours of his capture, Derek had transformed the entire scenario into a meticulously planned intelligence-gathering mission. The warehouse where the HOA believed they were interrogating him became a sophisticated command center, with every conversation, every whispered aside being carefully recorded and analyzed. Elena Rodriguez set up a mobile command unit in a nondescript van parked just outside the facility. Advanced communication equipment lined the walls, screens displaying multiple encrypted feeds, each one capturing fragments of the larger criminal network. Derek's embedded devices, disguised as everything from garden ornaments to household electronics, began to paint a comprehensive picture. We're looking at something much bigger than a local HOA, Elena muttered, studying the rapidly expanding digital map of connections. Financial trails stretched across multiple states, revealing a complex system of property fraud, money laundering, and systematic extortion. Derek strategically allowed his captors to believe they were in control. When Margaret Sinclair brought in her lead operative, a former law enforcement officer named Jack Remond, he knew this was his primary target. Remond had been the linchpin connecting the HOA's criminal activities to broader networks of corruption. "Tell me about the Oak Ridge development," Derek said casually during what appeared to be an interrogation, his tone suggesting vulnerability while his embedded recorders captured every nuanced response. Remond took the bait. Believing Derek was broken, he began to talk, first in careful, measured phrases, then with increasing confidence. Each word was a crucial piece of evidence, revealing a conspiracy that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The HOA's operation was far more sophisticated than a simple neighborhood management scheme. They had been systematically targeting properties, creating artificial code violations, forcing homeowners into costly legal battles, and then acquiring properties at a fraction of their value. Vulnerable homeowners, the elderly, recent divorcees, those facing financial challenges, were their primary targets. Elena watched the digital evidence accumulate. "We've got them," she whispered, watching multiple financial trails converge on her screens. Derek maintained his carefully crafted persona, part prisoner, part informant. He knew that the moment they felt most secure was when they would reveal the most. His seemingly innocuous questions led Remond down a path of increasing disclosure, each statement providing another thread in the complex criminal tapestry. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A casual mention of the Columbus file revealed a connection to a state-level political corruption scheme. Property assessments, zoning changes, strategic real estate acquisitions. The network extended far beyond a simple HOA. "How deep does this go?" Derek asked, his voice a perfect blend of defeated curiosity and subtle provocation. Remond, believing he was dealing with a broken man, began to outline the broader operation. He spoke of political connections, shell companies, and a network of corrupt officials who had been profiting from systematic property manipulation for years. Each word was a nail in their own coffin. By the time the interrogation concluded, Derek and Elena had gathered enough evidence to not just dismantle the local HOA, but to trigger a multi-state investigation that would reach into the highest levels of local and state government. The Garden Gnomes had indeed been watching, and they had seen everything. The federal operation unfolded with surgical precision across multiple jurisdictions. At precisely 5:37 a.m., coordinated raids began simultaneously in 6 different counties, targeting the intricate web of criminal operations that the HOA had carefully constructed over years. Derek stood in the central command center, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to the tactical gear surrounding him. Elena Rodriguez orchestrated the operation like a chess master, her fingers dancing across multiple communication channels. Each screen displayed a different raid location: suburban mansions, nondescript office buildings, and local government facilities. In Willow Creek Estates, local residents watched in stunned silence as federal agents swarmed the community clubhouse. Margaret Sinclair's carefully maintained facade crumbled as agents seized computers, financial records, and a collection of documents that would become crucial evidence. Jack Remond, the former law enforcement officer who had been the key operational link, was arrested at his waterfront home. As agents led him out in handcuffs, his wife, who had been entirely unaware of his criminal activities, stood on the front porch, her world collapsing around her. The scale of the operation was breathtaking. What had begun as an investigation into a local HOA had expanded into a massive takedown of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The network had been manipulating property values, extorting homeowners, and laundering money through a complex system of shell companies and false property assessments. Derek's undercover work revealed the true depth of the conspiracy. The HOA had been nothing more than a front, a seemingly legitimate organization that provided cover for a much larger criminal operation. They had systematically targeted vulnerable homeowners, creating artificial code violations, forcing legal battles, and then acquiring properties at a fraction of their true value. "We're living in over 247 fraudulent property transfers," Elena announced, her voice tight with professional satisfaction. Estimated damages exceed $63 million. The most shocking revelations came from the digital evidence Derek had collected. The network extended into local government, with several city council members and state representatives implicated in the scheme. Zoning changes, property reassessments, infrastructure project allocations, everything had been carefully manipulated to benefit this criminal network. As the day progressed, the dominoes continued to fall. Financial institutions began freezing accounts. Property titles came under immediate review. The carefully constructed house of cards that the HOA had built began to collapse completely. Derek watched a live feed of Margaret Sinclair being processed. She had gone from being the most feared person in Willow Creek Estates to a potential federal prisoner in a matter of hours. Her perfectly maintained appearance was now disheveled, her confidence shattered. Sometimes, Derek said quietly to Alina, the most dangerous criminals wear business casual and attend community meetings. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. A junior accountant who had been working for one of the shell companies turned state's witness. Her testimony would provide the final nail in the coffin of the criminal network, connecting the dots between local HOA operations and state-level corruption. By nightfall, what had begun as a simple suburban investigation had transformed into one of the most significant white-collar criminal takedowns in recent history. Derek Hartley had done more than solve the case. He had exposed a systemic corruption that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The garden gnomes, still standing perfectly arranged in Derek's yard, seemed to watch silently, the ultimate unnoticed witnesses to the entire operation. 6 months after the takedown, Willow Creek Estates had transformed from a haven of hidden corruption to a case study in community rebuilding. Derek Hartley stood at the center of this metamorphosis, though few residents fully understood the extent of his role in exposing the criminal network. The federal seizure of assets had created an unprecedented opportunity. Derek worked closely with local authorities and community leaders to reimagine the neighborhood's governance and structure. The proceeds from the criminal investigations were redirected into a community restoration fund, providing support for homeowners who had been victimized by the HOA's systematic extortion. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the legal proceedings, ensuring that every aspect of the investigation was meticulously documented. The trials revealed a stunning web of corruption that extended far beyond the initial HOA investigation. Margaret Sinclair and her key associates faced multiple federal charges, with potential sentences that would keep them in prison for decades. The most surprising transformation occurred within the community itself. Homeowners who had previously been too afraid to speak out now found their voices. Community meetings, once controlled by fear and manipulation, became genuine forums for discussion and mutual support. Derek established the Willow Creek Community Transparency Center, a local resource dedicated to educating residents about their rights, providing legal support, and creating mechanisms for community oversight. The center became a symbol of hope and resilience, built on the very property where the HOA had once conducted its criminal operations. Jack Remond's fall from grace had particularly far-reaching consequences. His testimony,